The billionaire's hand froze mid-signature. Elon Musk had launched rockets into space, revolutionized electric vehicles, and built companies worth hundreds of billions. He had faced bankruptcy, public ridicule, and regulatory battles without flinching. But now, staring at the security footage on his laptop in his private medical research facility, he couldn't breathe. The new janitor was mopping the floor of the advanced surgical wing, nothing unusual except for the chain around her neck. Not gold, not platinum, just a simple ball chain with what appeared to be half of a military dog tag dangling from it. A dog tag he had torn in half 18 years ago in a field hospital outside Kandahar, giving one piece to a combat medic who had saved his life more times than he could count. Elon Musk owned Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and a dozen other ventures that pushed the boundaries of human achievement. His name was synonymous with innovation. His net worth fluctuated by billions daily. His companies employed over 100,000 people worldwide, yet he couldn't sleep. Every night he lay in his minimalist bedroom, surrounded by the hum of climate control systems and the glow of charging devices, staring at the ceiling until dawn crept through the smart glass windows. His doctors prescribed everything from melatonin to sleeping pills. His therapists suggested mindfulness apps and meditation retreats. Nothing worked. Control. That was what Elon needed. Control over every variable, every outcome, every risk factor. That was why he had personally overseen the hiring for his newest venture, the Musk Foundation Medical Research Center in Austin, Texas, a billion-dollar facility dedicated to advancing surgical techniques, neural interfaces for paralyzed patients, and regenerative medicine. But he hadn't interviewed the janitorial staff. That was delegated to facilities management. His chief of operations, an efficient woman named Sarah Chen, had assured him they had hired the most qualified cleaning crew in the state. Background checks completed, references verified, NDAs signed. Elon had barely noticed them. He spent his days moving between board meetings, design reviews, and late-night coding sessions. The facility was his retreat, the one place where he could focus on solving problems that mattered, medical breakthroughs that could change lives. For the first 3 weeks after the facility opened, Elon maintained his usual schedule. 18-hour days, sleeping on a couch in his office, surviving on coffee and whatever his assistant brought him. The medical center was immaculate, but he never paid attention to who kept it that way. Then, his sleep patterns changed. It started subtly. Instead of 3 hours of restless sleep, he got 4, then 5, then, impossibly, 6 uninterrupted hours. He woke up feeling something he hadn't experienced in years: actual rest. Elon couldn't explain it. Nothing in his routine had changed. Same stress levels, same workload, same caffeine intake, yet his body was responding differently to the environment. He started paying attention to details. The air quality seemed better, somehow. The lighting in his office had been adjusted, warmer during the evening, cooler in the morning. His desk was organized in a way that felt intuitive, everything within reach, but nothing cluttered. Someone was optimizing his environment, and they were doing it invisibly. Elon did what he always did when confronted with an anomaly. He investigated. He pulled up the security footage, scanning through hours of recordings until he found the pattern. The night janitor. She worked from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., moving through the facility with quiet efficiency. She didn't just clean, she observed. She noticed when the temperature was too cold and adjusted the thermostat. She repositioned lamps to reduce screen glare. She even reorganized his charging cables to prevent tangling. It was the kind of attention to detail that Elon recognized in his best engineers, the kind of spatial awareness and problem-solving that couldn't be taught. But it was the dog tag that stopped his heart. He zoomed in on the footage, enhancing the image until he could see it clearly. Half of a military identification tag, the edges rough where it had been torn rather than cut. On it, partially visible, were letters he knew by heart. Musk, E, and half of his service number. Elon closed his laptop and opened it again, his hands shaking. He hadn't thought about Afghanistan in 18 years. He had buried that part of his life so deep that most people didn't even know he had served. It was 2006. Elon was 35 years old, and Tesla was hemorrhaging money. SpaceX had just experienced its second rocket failure. His board of directors was in revolt. Investors were pulling out, and the press was calling him a delusional dreamer wasting his PayPal fortune. In a moment of what his therapist later called a self-destructive impulse, Elon had volunteered for a civilian engineering advisory position in Afghanistan. The military needed technical experts to help with field equipment and communication systems. It was supposed to be safe, behind the wire, purely consultative. Then, the convoy was ambushed. Elon remembered the explosion, the ringing in his ears, the taste of blood and dust. He remembered dragging himself from the overturned Humvee, his leg shattered, shrapnel embedded in his shoulder. He remembered thinking, absurdly, that he was going to die in the desert before his company succeeded, before he proved everyone wrong. Then she appeared. Aliana Gazmich, combat medic, 24 years old, from a small town in Oregon. She had run through active gunfire to reach him, thrown herself over his body when the second explosion hit, and somehow, impossibly, gotten him to the field hospital alive. He woke up 12 hours later in a tent that smelled like antiseptic and blood. Aliana was sitting beside his cot, her uniform torn and stained, her face streaked with dust and exhaustion. She had been awake for 36 hours straight treating casualties from the ambush. "You're an idiot," were her first words to him. "What's a billionaire tech guy doing in a combat zone?" "Trying to help," Elon managed through the pain medication fog. "You helped by almost dying. Great contribution." But she smiled when she said it. And for the next 6 weeks, as Elon recovered in the field hospital, unable to be evacuated due to his injuries and ongoing operations, Aliana became his lifeline. She changed his bandages and kept him from descending into despair. She told him stories about her childhood in Oregon, about her father, who was a firefighter, about her dream of becoming a doctor someday. She listened when he talked about rockets and electric cars and saving humanity, and she didn't laugh or call him crazy. "You're gonna do it," she said one night during a mortar attack, both of them lying on the floor of the field hospital while explosions shook the walls. "You're gonna change the world, I can tell." "How can you tell?" Elon asked, his heart pounding. "Because you're too stubborn to fail and too stupid to quit." The attacks got worse. The field hospital took a direct hit, killing 2 doctors and 5 patients. Aliana pulled 3 wounded soldiers from the rubble, working for 14 hours straight without rest. When it was over, she sat beside Elon's cot and cried for the first time since she'd met him. He wanted to comfort her, but he didn't know how. So he told her about his companies, about the future he was building, about the medical advances that would come from the technologies he was developing. "When I get back," he said, his voice raw with sincerity, "when these companies succeed, I'm going to build something for people like you, a research center, a hospital, something that gives back. And you're going to run it with me. We survive this, we'll open a clinic together. That's a promise." Aliana looked at him with those eyes that had seen too much death, too much pain, and she smiled. "You're going to forget about me the moment you get back to your rockets." "Never," Elon said. He grabbed his dog tags, the only personal item he still had, and snapped them in half with brute force. He handed her one piece. "Keep this. When I open that facility, you show me this, and we'll build it together." She had taken the tag and held it like it was made of gold. 2 weeks later, Elon was finally cleared for evacuation. He was flown to Germany, then back to the States, where he immediately threw himself back into saving his companies. Tesla was on the verge of bankruptcy. SpaceX needed a successful launch or they would lose their NASA contract. He told himself he would contact Eliana once things stabilized. He would keep his promise once he had the resources to actually build something meaningful. But months turned into years. Tesla released the Roadster, SpaceX successfully launched Falcon 9, then came the Model S, the Falcon 9, the Dragon spacecraft. Success built upon success, each achievement demanding more time, more focus, more sacrifice. Elon told himself the military would have changed Eliana's contact information. He told himself she had probably moved on with her life, gone to medical school like she wanted, forgotten about the delirious tech billionaire she saved in Afghanistan. He told himself a lot of things to avoid admitting the truth. He was afraid. Afraid that if he reached out, she would see what he had become. Not a hero or a visionary, but a workaholic who broke promises. Someone who said he... Elon read the letter 11 times. Then he sat in his empty office, surrounded by everything innovation could create, and felt the full weight of his own cowardice crushing him. He had known where she was for 5 years. He had hired private investigators when his wealth became secure enough to risk someone digging into his past. They had found her easily enough working as a hospital janitor in Portland, living alone in a modest apartment, still wearing the dog tag he had given her. He could have gone to her at any time. He had the resources, the private jets, the freedom to do anything he wanted. Nothing was stopping him except his own fear. Fear that she would reject him, fear that she would forgive him, fear that either outcome would force him to acknowledge what he had done. The person he had abandoned, the promise he had broken, the way he had chosen ambition over loyalty. So he had done nothing. He had watched from a distance, monitoring her life through quarterly reports, making sure she was safe and employed, telling himself that knowing she was okay was enough. It wasn't enough. It had never been enough. And now she was gone again. And this time it was entirely his fault. 4 days passed. Elon did not go to SpaceX, he did not visit Tesla, he did not answer calls from his board members or respond to urgent emails from his executives. He sat in his medical research facility and read Aliana's letter until he had memorized every word, every curve of her handwriting, every space between the lines. She had asked him not to look for her. He had spent 18 years not looking for her, and it had made him into a man he could barely recognize in the mirror. On the 5th morning, Elon put on jeans and a plain t-shirt he hadn't worn in months, left his phone on his desk, and drove himself to the Austin airport. He chartered a small plane to Portland. The address was still in his files from the investigator's report 5 years ago, a small apartment building in a working-class neighborhood, the kind of place where people minded their own business and didn't recognize billionaires without their usual entourage. Elon parked across the street and sat in the rented sedan for nearly 2 hours watching the entrance. He had faced Senate hearings and survived Twitter mobs and dealt with existential risks to his companies without flinching. But the thought of walking up those stairs terrified him more than any rocket explosion. Finally, he forced himself out of the car. The building had no elevator. He climbed 3 flights of stairs, each step heavier than the last. When he reached her door, apartment 3C, he stood there for a long moment, his hand raised to knock, his courage failing him. Then he thought about the dog tag, the photograph, the 7 seconds she had frozen when she saw that first aid kit. She had carried his memory for 18 years. The least he could do was face her. He knocked. The door opened and Aliana stood before him in jeans and a worn Oregon Duck sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. The dog tag hung around her neck, back where it belonged. She looked at him without surprise, as if she had been expecting this moment since the night she left. "You found me," she said. Elon swallowed hard. "I always knew where you were." Something flickered in her eyes, but she didn't respond. 5 years ago, he continued, the words spilling out before he could stop them, I hired someone to find all the personnel from that field hospital. I told myself I was just curious, that I wanted to make sure everyone made it home okay. But really, I was only looking for you." Eliana leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed. "And when you found me?" "I did nothing." Elon felt the shame burning in his chest. "I knew where you lived, where you worked. I knew you still wore the dog tag. I knew you were alone. And I did nothing because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid you would look at me and see what I really am, a coward who made a promise to a 24-year-old combat medic and then disappeared without even a goodbye. Someone who chose companies over people, someone who let the person who saved his life spend 18 years working as a janitor while he launched rockets into space." Aliana was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "Why are you here now, Elon?" He had rehearsed answers to this question during the entire flight from Austin. Explanations, justifications, carefully constructed arguments about timing and circumstances. But standing in front of her, all of those words dissolved into nothing. "Because I don't want to be a coward anymore," he said simply. "Not for one more day." Eliana studied his face, searching for something. Whatever she found made her step back from the doorway. "Come in." Her apartment was small but immaculately clean, filled with secondhand furniture and medical textbooks stacked on every surface. Elon noticed a certificate on the wall. "Licensed practical nurse, State of Oregon, dated 3 years ago." "You went back to school," he said. "Part-time while working. Took me 8 years." She gestured to the couch. "Sit." Elon sat, feeling oversized and out of place, his presence absurd in the modest surroundings. Aliana took the armchair across from him, maintaining distance. "You were right to leave." "No, let me finish." Her voice was firm. "You were 35 years old, injured, traumatized, and you had 2 companies on the verge of failure. When they evacuated you, you had a choice: drown in guilt and nostalgia, or save everything you had built. You chose survival. That doesn't make you a coward, that makes you human." Elon shook his head. "I didn't just survive, I thrived. I built an empire while I lived my life?" Aliana's eyes flashed. "You don't get to feel guilty about my choices. I could have gone to medical school right after my service ended. I could have used my GI Bill. I could have done a dozen things differently. But I was dealing with my own demons, my own PTSD, my own survival." She touched the dog tag at her neck. "This isn't a chain binding me to you. It's a reminder that I survived, that someone once saw me as worth saving, worth protecting, worth remembering. Whether you came back or not, I had that. Do you understand?" Elon felt tears threatening. "Then why did you take the job at my facility?" "Honestly, curiosity." Eliana smiled slightly. "I saw the announcement about the medical center, saw your name, and I wondered if the man who promised to build something meaningful actually did it. Wondered if the stubborn idiot who argued with me about rocket science while on morphine actually changed the world like he said he would." "And?" "You did. You built something incredible. You kept the promise, just not the way either of us expected." She leaned forward. "But Elon, I didn't come to collect on an 18-year-old promise. I came for closure, to see that you were okay, that you became someone good. And you are. What you did at that gala, defending someone you thought was just your janitor, that told me everything I needed to know." Elon reached into his jacket and pulled out a small cloth bundle. Inside was his half of the dog tag, the piece he had kept in a safe for 18 years. He placed it on the coffee table between them. "I'm not here to ask you to forgive me," he said. "I'm not here to make promises I might not be able to keep. I'm just here to tell you that I want to try, not as a billionaire trying to rescue someone, not as someone paying off guilt, just as 2 people who survived something terrible together and maybe, if you're willing, could survive something beautiful together." Eliana looked at the dog tag half, then back at Elon. "What are you actually asking for?" "A chance to figure out what happens next. Together." He paused. "You said in your letter you didn't want to be the woman who waits. I'm not asking you to wait. I'm asking if you'd be willing to build something with me. Not a clinic, not a company. Something more important. A life where neither of us is alone anymore." For the first time since he'd arrived, Aliana's composure cracked. Her eyes glistened and she pressed her lips together as if holding back words that were waiting 18 years to escape. "Do you know what kept me going all those years?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "It wasn't the promise. I stopped believing in the promise a long time ago." Elon waited, almost afraid to breathe. "The night you made this," she touched her dog tag, "you were so determined to tear it with your bare hand that you cut your palm on the metal edge. You were bleeding, and you didn't have anything to bandage it with, so I tore a strip from my undershirt and wrapped it around your hand." Eliana met his eyes. "That was when I knew you were different. You were willing to hurt yourself to give me something meaningful. No one had ever done that for me before. Not family, not friends, no one. I kept this because it reminded me that I was worth bleeding for. Even if you forgot, even if you never came back, someone once thought I was worth that much." Elon felt tears sliding down his face. He didn't try to wipe them away. "I never forgot, not one day. I just convinced myself that forgetting was easier than facing what I'd done, that building companies was enough, that changing the world would somehow balance the scales." Eliana rose from her chair and crossed the small distance between them. She sat beside him on the couch, close enough that he could smell the familiar scent of antiseptic and lavender that had surrounded her, even in Afghanistan. "I don't need promises," she said quietly. "I don't need grand gestures or apologies or explanations. I just need to know that you're here because you want to be, not because you feel obligated." Elon took her hand, the one that had saved his life, that had changed countless bandages, that had worked minimum wage jobs while he built billion-dollar companies. "I'm here because for 18 years I've been building an empire to prove I was worth something, and the whole time, the